Hi everybody, I'm Tim Cortesi and this is Adam Smallcomb from Binghamton University, and we're going to talk a little bit today about Binghamton's portal. And I figured people would probably, whenever we talk about things that we're doing at Binghamton, people are like, well, yeah, that's neat, but I mean, in all reality, why should I care about this? Because that's something you guys are doing, and hopefully by the end of the session, we'll actually answer that question in a somewhat convincing way. So we're going to start off with just kind of talking about a brief history of portals dating back to like the probably mid-90s. We're going to talk about a thing called Graphene, which we've developed at Binghamton University. We're going to talk about challenges to application development within higher ed, and Adam's going to do a little update on where Graphene is right now and how that relates to SUNY. And then if we have time, we're going to try to do some Q&A. So if I start with a brief history of portals, if we think back to like the mid-90s and into the early 2000s, the portals that we think of are really these monolithic portals, right? I mean, we're thinking of something like AOL, which at the time, when AOL first came out, they really didn't even bundle it with a web browser. It was just this big thing that you went into, and you had your Encyclopedia Britannica in there, you had your chat, you had your email, you had anything that you might want to do as a user on the internet, really in this singular centralized place. And then fast forward a few years, you've got companies like Yahoo doing something similar, where you have this single place that people go and they do literally everything that you might want to do on the internet. And when we think of portals today, we still think of them in that way. We want to have this single place where our students can go, our staff can go, our faculty can go, and do everything that they might want to do. And so if we think about what are the features of those monolithic portals, well, we have content sharing collaboration, we have targeted relevant communication, and we have targeted and relevant content. But if we fast forward over the years since the days of the monolithic portal, what's ended up happening is those cornerstones have started to erode, right? So where we had content sharing and collaboration before, we have the birth of really robust and good collaboration tools like SharePoint, Basecamp, Google Drive, and even your campus LMS could be considered a collaboration tool. And I want to stress that these tools are better than anything that AOL or Yahoo offered, but they are fragmented, they are separate, and they are in their own little space. Similarly, messaging, we now have the birth of the CRM, the Customer Relationship Management System, Salesforce, Slate, Microsoft CRM, and content has given birth to the CMS, the Content Management System. So all of these tools are really good, they're really robust, but what's happened is they've started to kind of move in on the space that was taken before by the monolithic portal. So what we've ended up with is kind of this hodgepodge of stuff that's in a pile together. It's good, but it's definitely not integrated, and it's definitely not a common user experience. And of course, since we're in higher ed, we throw in our LMS, we throw in our SIS, and then we've got all these other applications that we have to develop on the side because that's not enough, and we need to throw in some more things. But then somebody comes to us and says, well, we really want to have a singular experience for everybody. We need a portal. So let's throw that in there too. And we have a portal, but you'll notice it's not one cohesive thing. It's just another thing that we've dumped into the pile. But don't worry, we're okay because we've got single sign-on. We wrap this thing up. And we put a bow on it, we pat ourselves on the back, and we say, boom, we've got it. We've got a portal, we've got single sign-on, and we've got a great user experience for our students. But obviously, that's not really the case. So if we look at what our options are for portals in 2019, we kind of have these two things. We have the thing on the left here, which is the old legacy portals. These are largely based in like Java. LifeRay uPortal, they've been branded. I think LifeRay is sold by Campus CAI as Looking Glass. uPortal was, I think, Luminous Portal or whatever. I don't know. These things are old. They've been reskinned a whole bunch of times. You put a mobile first CSS scanner or something on it, and you say it's modern. They're fine, but they're not ideal. And then on the other side of the table, we have things that are not portals that, we've just categorized them in the previous slides as being a CMS or a CRM or whatever. But a lot of people will like to dress those things up and put those as portal as well. So SharePoint is a super popular portal platform. I think Aleutian Portal now is based on SharePoint, and then people will use like WordPress and Drupal, and they'll build portals like that. But again, these are not really portal platforms. These are other platforms that people have skinned to look like a portal. And that's really what portals look like in 2019. It's less, obviously, than ideal. So if we go back a few years, something interesting kind of happened. Gartner termed or coined the term UXP, which stands for this user experience platform thing. And they said this is an integrated set of technologies used to provide interaction between a user and a set of applications, processes, content, services, and other users. And this thing is fully going to emerge in 2013, and the problem is going to go away. Obviously, since I'm sure this is the first time many of you are seeing this term, that obviously never happened. But it was an interesting thought, and we kind of ran with that a little bit. So we thought, okay, well, let's build a time machine. Let's go back and see if we can build what this actual UXP would look like. So of course we've got our campus CRM, we've got our collaboration tools, we've got our LMS SIS, we've got our CMS. We've got all these custom applications and databases on our campus that, all of these fragmented things. And so, okay, we're going to drop in the UXP. And if we're going to replicate what was done in the 90s, what we'd be doing is we'd be trying to get rid of all those other applications and like rewrite them somehow magically within the centralized thing, and everything would be great. But that's not really a reality. And so the best that we can do is we can try to do really, really, really deep integrations from a UI perspective, from a UX perspective, integrating back with those other separate systems, but in your UXP, in your portal platform. So students, when they're logging in, they're seeing all of the information from all of those different disjointed, fragmented systems, and they're interacting with that information. But the data is still living in those separate places. You're not like having them leave the portal to go do those things. They're staying in that place, but they're interfacing with data that lives somewhere else, and that's a tricky thing to do. And then, of course, I'll go back one more. We've got all those custom applications that we were developing outside in this other fragmented area, and ideally, it would be nice if we could start pulling those things in there as well, since we need to develop applications, and we might as well do it in the place where students are already going to be. And of course, we put single sign-on because that's something that we got to do. So features of a modern UXP, right? The stuff on the left is pretty self-explanatory. I would say pretty much all modern portals meet those requirements: mobile first, pages, groups, permissions management, content building, and all of that stuff. But what we decided is really more important than in addition to those other things, we need to have a way to actually develop software natively really well directly inside of the UXP, inside of the portal platform. And what does that mean? In order to get those really deep links and those integrations back with those other disjointed systems, we need to be able to consume APIs, specifically RESTful APIs. If no APIs exist, we need a really nice and super easy way to create those APIs against those other databases. We need a full integrated development environment, a full IDE inside of the framework. We don't want to have different people having to set up IDEs across all of their different PCs and have that whole learning curve associated with just getting going with development. We need version control built in here. We need a nice MVC environment. And this all needs to be based on open standards, because the last thing we want is to have yet another product where we're committing all of our code, thousands of lines of code into, and then maybe we decide we want to go in a different direction, and now we have to literally rewrite everything. So everything that we do in here, we want to be portable enough that if we needed to, we could pull it out or do something else with it at some other time. So now I'm going to talk about Graphene, because Graphene is something that Binghamton University has been working on for the past 3 years or so to try to address this gap, this need for a proper portal, or UXP as we've called it. So if we go back to that triangle that I had there, we have content sharing and collaboration, targeted relevant communication, and targeted relevant content. Ideally, if Graphene is meeting those needs, we are then able to deliver an experience which is more similar to what we were hoping for with the monolithic portal back in the 90s and 2000s. So we'll start with widgets, gadgets, and portlets. I'm going to try to go through these a little bit quickly because we've got so many of these things. But stop me if you want me to spend any more time on this. This is the homepage that Binghamton University students or faculty or staff might see when they log into My Binghamton, and this is a Binghamton branded instance of Graphene. And I say might see because what you see in here is very specifically specific to you. Depending on what your role is on campus, depending on if you're a freshman, if you're a incoming transfer student, depending on how many credit hours you have, depending on what classes you're taking, this is a very, very specifically customized experience. But just getting back to those basic widgets, on the left-hand side, we have links that you might want to have. Again, though, the links that you see are very specific to who you are, so staff are going to see different links than faculty, than students, graduate students, all very specific to them. We've got, obviously, our slideshow on here, because every good portal needs to have, a big slideshow on there. This is actually a pretty basic widget that's pulling from, Binghamton uses Google for calendaring and for mail, so this is using those APIs to fetch number of messages that you've got on read and your calendar for the day. We've got a nice poll, because students seem to like polls. We've got the bus view here, where you can actually see all the buses on campus, where they are, how many minutes until the next stop. We've got our computer labs, and so a student can, before maybe they leave their dorm, they can see how full the computer labs are at any point in time. Same thing for the gym. They can see, based on the equipment that they might want to use at the gym, they can see how full that is at any point in time, and we have metrics that run against that. This is another page of more stuff. Events, calendars, RSS feeds, etc. You get the point. Content sharing and collaboration. So this is a relatively common thing that schools will use, whether you're using Google or Office 365 or whatever. This is a calendar of our conference rooms. Let's say, okay, well, what meetings are scheduled in that particular day? Specifically, this is ITS's conference room calendar. And so while this is nice, people can pull up the calendar on their Google Calendar. We thought it would be really nice if the same information could be visible in the portal. So when ITS people log into My Binghamton, they specifically have a view which shows them all of the meetings that are scheduled in all the different conference rooms for the day. And again, that's ITS specific people only. Similarly, ITS people, the senior leadership has meetings notes which they put out on Google Drive, and people can go in and look at that. But rather than having it in Google Drive, we use those APIs again, and we have a specific page built out in our portal which has the information. Hopefully you're starting to see a theme here. This is, Binghamton University has a group of people that are available in an emergency for translation purposes. So if they need to translate between two languages, there's a spreadsheet out on the web that has all of this information on it. And in an emergency, you could go to find the right Google spreadsheet on the internet. Or again, we've built a reasonably straightforward micro application in My Binghamton where the same information is there. It's actually pulling live from that spreadsheet. It's filterable, it's searchable, same information, but again, natively displayed right there. So targeted relevant communication. Now I've got an impossible homepage here where on the top here I've got a student who's coming in as a freshman who needs to sign up for orientation. And so once they do that, that'll actually unleash unlock other checkboxes that they might have to do, and it allows them to fill out information about their transfer articulation credits from their APs and all of that stuff. But again, this is specific to just incoming freshman students, again, also in specific schools. And then on the flip side, we have the students that are graduating. So if you're greater than like 90 credit hours, you are asked, hey, you need to sign up for commencement, and then depending on certain things from DegreeWorks, it'll allow you to actually just sign up and walk, or you may have to petition to your academic advisor. So there's the targeted messaging, and then there's also the action that you can take to do those things. Another one here is for UUP people that tells you, hey, it's time to fill out your self-promotion increase. And even things like those banners on there, those are specific to who you are, so you're going to see different slideshows depending on what your role is on campus. This is one that a lot of people end up doing. So every semester we want people to update their emergency contact information. So we put up a big message on their My Binghamton homepage that won't go away until they've confirmed or updated their emergency contact information. So it's content that's specific and targeted at the individual, but then it's also giving them the ability to take action on that. And the last one here is targeted and relevant content. So this is a page that students would see if they go to their academic services. They can see all their grades, all their classes, their schedule. And these are pulling from Banner, pulling from Blackboard. The final exam schedule is actually pulling from a CSV file that lives on some server somewhere that's being exported out of something else. And so these are all in different places, but again, all aggregated together. This is where students go in to provide, it's called student opinion of teaching, so their end of semester faculty evaluation forms. So they can go in and they can do all that right here in My Binghamton. Similarly, the faculty can go in and they can actually look at the results in the same place. And again, we're pulling this data from Blackboard, we're pulling it from Banner, and actually the HR database, because we have to figure out who the TAs are for all the different classes. What's this one? This is faculty reporting. I'm not going to talk about all these. We literally have 200 and something of these micro applications that are for different people to do different things in different situations. This one is, what is this one? Oh, this is signing up for reserving rooms for tutoring, or not for tutoring, for testing. So if students have special testing accommodations, the faculty can go into here and they can set up, or they can request to have certain students do things related to testing, and again, that's pulling from Banner and etc. What else we got? I actually run the 3D printing ETS makerspace on our campus, so this is where students can go in and they can actually submit print jobs. Again, though, you have to be a ETS member for that. This is for staff and faculty if they want to swap furniture in their offices. It's kind of like a Craigslist, but for furniture. Lots of stuff. This is the ITS page in my Binghamton, so this is just what ITS people will see. And specifically this Who's Out thing over here, this is a custom widget just for ITS, so we can see in any given day who happens to be in and who happens to be out. How much more stuff do I have here? Yeah, okay, that's enough. We have, like I said, we have so much more than this, but that's a taste. But you might be thinking after looking at all this, like, well, okay, that's neat, but why Graphene? Like, I could do all of this stuff in whatever. I could do it in SharePoint or WordPress or Liferay or whatever, and that's a totally valid point. You could actually do any of those applications in really any of those frameworks. But the reason that we've tried to build something like Graphene is because every time you want to build any one of those individual applications, those micro apps, as I was talking about, there's a whole bunch of steps that you have to go through before you can really before you can even get started. You have to set up your development environment. You have to figure out how you're going to do code compilation. You got to figure out how you're going to manage permissions around who can develop the thing, but then also who's going to manage the thing from an end user perspective, who's going to have permissions to see it once you deploy it. We need to figure out how we're going to do the sign-ons. Authentication is a thing that's a concern. Version control, if we need to roll things back or roll things forward, how are we going to check it in? Production control, so we don't push code into production that's old or out of date or bad or broken. And then, of course, we want to have a common UI for all of this because we don't want to have like all the different people developing things doing so with a totally different aesthetic. And so all of those steps aren't really that big of a deal if you're at a company like Facebook where you have 100 programmers or 1,000 programmers literally working on a single application. But that's not our reality. We have 100 we have one program maybe supporting 100 applications, and that's not really hyperbolic. That's literally a thing that we deal with on a regular basis. And so having all of those barriers to entry associated with all of those different things, yes, you technically could do it, but you literally end up drowning as a developer trying to support all of these integrations. So we've tried to reduce that workload. And I'm just going to show a couple screenshots of what this actually looks like from a developer's perspective. We're actually looking here at a micro application. This is a list of all of the API resources that we're consuming from various different data sources. This is where all the code is. So I'm actually literally just in the web browser right now, writing code in JavaScript right in the web browser. I've got all my syntax highlighting in place. In fact, if I try to do something, I've got real-time code verification in here. So a lot of the developers are still like SSHing into terminal windows and trying to type code in Emacs or whatever, and this obviously takes care of all of that. You have a developer environment with you wherever you are. We've got all of our templating in here. We've actually got a really nice automated form library with a drag and drop interface where since so many of the applications that we develop on a regular basis are really forms with a little bit of back and forth between a data source. We have the ability to drag and drop form elements directly onto these micro applications, and that's all built into here. We've got version control, so you can actually create new versions. You can roll back to previous versions. You can compare versions. That's all built in, and we've got permissions around who are the developers that can do all of this stuff. This is all built directly into the framework itself. And I'm going to switch over. Actually, I've been talking about Graphene a lot, but there's actually a few companion products to Graphene. One is the Graphene API Gateway, and so this is similar. It's not quite Graphene, but this is the tool that we actually use to create APIs themselves. So this is a bunch of APIs that we wrote against Banner. You can actually see what they do, the different verbs that you can call if you're doing like RESTful transactions. And if I go into here, you can actually see, well, there's the code. That's the SQL that we're running against Banner to extract those fields out of there. And the nice thing about developing APIs in this way is that all the APIs that you develop using Graphene API Gateway, the documentation for all of them is totally automatically generated with this nice user interface. So it'll actually build, as long as you set up everything correctly, it'll actually tell you, it'll give you examples on how to call those APIs using curl or whatever tool that you happen to be using. It's actually kind of neat. So ultimately, what we end up doing is all of those barriers kind of get knocked down, and it really then becomes relatively straightforward for somebody to come in and start building these things out relatively quickly. And so what would take maybe a matter of weeks before is something that we knock out in 1 or 2 days. So I mean, somebody comes to us and says, hey, I really need something that's going to look like this and pull from these 3 different places or whatever. And we used to say, oh man, that's going to be a giant pain in the butt. And now it's okay. Well, maybe that'll I'll do that after lunch. And that's a big difference for us. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam here. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you utilize, or why didn't you utilize the existing APIs
We can and do. Yeah. So where the APIs make sense, and so performance is also a consideration because, like on the homepage of My Binghamton, we have 20,000 students hitting that literally constantly, and so the APIs need to be fast enough that we don't bring down Banner in the process. So sometimes we'll end up creating our own custom API that just queries the very specific things that we want to hit. For the things that are a little bit more buried, where maybe you have to go to a certain page, yeah, then we'll use the existing stuff that's available. It really is just a matter of preference at that point. Yeah.
You can do caching on some of those.
Yep. Yeah, and we even have caching built at this layer. Yeah. Yeah. So there's no reason why you can't use existing APIs. It's just that some times we don't have APIs. Sometimes we'll actually wrap APIs in other APIs just because it whatever makes sense in the time. Yeah. Right, you go ahead.
All right. So first, we're going to talk about a few of the grants and why how these affect you guys. So first, we want to talk about IITGE grants. We got in 2018. We applied for a Tier 3 award for developing a cross-campus, interdisciplinary electronic medical health record system simulator. And so we were working with our pharmacy to do that, and we applied, and our response was, their response back to us was, that's impossible. You can't build it in that amount of time. And so they only gave us a small portion of it. And so what happened is we ended up using Graphene to build on top of, and so as Tim was just showing you, all those barriers being removed, we were actually able to build a fully functioning demo, proof of concept, a little more than proof of concept, but for them to reapply. And so then after showing them that in 2019, we were able to get the full award and are now generating this. And so this application, because it lives in Graphene, anyone who has Graphene installed locally can just install this application on top of it. Because I don't think we talked about this, but all of the micro apps you can export and import into other instances, and then you just remap your endpoints to your local databases or whatever. So that's the first one you care about. The next one is a CCAS grant. And so we got a rather sizable CCAS grant in 2018. With the purpose of this was mostly threefold. We were de-Binghamtonizing. I'm not sure that's a word, but that's what we were doing. Adding documentation and providing a pilot program. So under the de-Binghamtonization, we had a few steps. We added theming and removed all of the, as you saw before, the Binghamton green and the icon. They used to be all hard-coded in there. We removed all that from being hard-coded, and it's now themable with CSS styling and templating for all the pages and layouts. This is where we had previously been using just a set of PHP scripts for our APIs. This is where we said, well, that's great for us, but we can't tell somebody else that they need to go use this random thing. So that's when we created the Graphene API Gateway as well, so that we could offer something on the back end. There's some other pieces of this. We extended our authentication options. Added more. There was one other thing I was going to say there. So then we did a bunch of documentation. The first link there is to a wiki we created for Graphene that has a bunch of videos, tutorials, and as well as documentation. There's I think you saw part of what the API gateway provides as it's generated, but there's also documentation for how to use it. Graphene Forms, I think Tim also hinted at, which is what we used in that drag and drop form builder. The Graphene Forms provides us a lot of functionality that allows forms to be just explicitly defined as far as like things that are duplication and hidden and shown, because that's a common thing you want with forms. And so this really streamlines a lot of that. And we added a ton of documentation there. The other demonetization I was going to say was we added a setup wizard so that anyone who we didn't have to fully understand how it worked. You just walk through go to the homepage and it'll start walking you through all the setup. And then finally we have a pilot that we started running in when was it? Earlier this year in spring, and with New Pulse, and they are going well. They've got their instance set up. They're currently working on what content they're going to be putting in there, and they're hoping to go live in January. All right, so we have a few new efforts we wanted to talk about as well today. This first one, so I'm sure we're the only ones who have the problem of too much paper forms, and so on the one hand, everyone agrees there's too much paper forms and we need to really automate it. On the other hand, like every tool, it seems, has their own way of doing workflows. And so you end up with tons of solutions and lots of need, and none of them get implemented because you have to pay like on an end user basis, and so you end up restricting it to like 5 people that can actually submit them. Anyways, so within Graphene, we've over the past few years built a few workflows out through the micro apps. And that's fine when you're doing 1 or 2, but earlier this year we were working with the Research Foundation at Binghamton, and they needed 70 some workflows by like the fall. So we decided that we should probably streamline this a little more. So we started working on a workflow engine to be built out. And in Graphene, we decided we've already got users, we've got groups, and we've got forms. That's most of what a workflow is. We'll throw a finite state machine engine on the back end to control it, and so we're most of the way through development of that. Not quite ready to show that one off yet, but we should be finishing that up in a preliminary sense the next month or so. And by the end of summer, hoping to have the first 2 forms of those for workflows rolled out and begin testing those. And then once we finish that, our CEO seems to think we don't have enough to do, so we compliance training is the next thing we're going to be doing. So this one separate. So the last one I just told you about, we're actually baking right into Graphene the workflows and making it a core part. This one's just going to be an application, no micro app that runs probably a handful of micro apps that interact with each other in a database. And so while it won't come as part of Graphene, it would again be able to be installed just like any other micro app, just imported. So this is by the end of the year where we think we'll have this one ready to go as well. All right, so hopefully by now you all are wondering how you can get this. And it's all open source. It's up on Git. We have all of that there. You can see it's under Git, GitHub, Azure Labs. There's a few others, the Forms library, and I think we have the grid table and a few other things there. But I would encourage you to go look at it or contact either one of us, or if you're interested in the pilot, you can see would probably be interested if you wanted to pursue the pilot. All right, we have any more questions? Yeah.
How about web accessibility? Are you baking that into play? People can't make bad choices.
Where we can, we have absolutely enforce that, or at least encourage that. So for our base widgets are like slideshows and links and stuff, and yes, those enforce you to put in alt text and everything. I mean, when the developer is building a custom template in app, we can't enforce it, but we have tried to encourage it where we can enforce it. Yeah, and the framework itself, by default, everything, all the Chrome around it and everything is all accessible. And that's the other thing is the form library, because you're just saying like what type of form you want. You're not actually building HTML. That automatically generates all the accessibility area fonts, area help stuff, and along with it. So
I kind of have a twofold question.
Sure.
So, how much maintenance do you actually do? Do you continuously update it? And second, What do you foresee if a campus wanted to adopt it? How much maintenance, they probably have to do on their end?
You want to address that one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can deploy this. If you go check out the video tutorials on here, I think there's like 3 different ways of deploying it with a traditional lamp stack versus whatever. We actually at Binghamton are deploying this on AWS, and I am the person who does that. I'm not a sysadmin. I'm not qualified to do that, but I personally manage my Binghamton, and that's with a full load balancer that's automatic scaling, so it scales up and down automatically. I get a text message while I'm on vacation that says the load was above 25%, so I added 3 new nodes, and when I say I mean the AWS fairies or whatever. But yeah, it kind of does it. I mean, so there's a way to set this up where it would be a giant pain in the butt, and you got to do all your own load balancing and your own load scaling or whatever. With that said, we have tutorials and stuff out there that say how to do it on AWS, and if you do it that way, honestly, it's not even a thing I think about.
We don't.
Do you do other things other than?
Oh yeah,
it's not just my Binghamton.
No, this is maybe like 1/5 of my job. Yeah, right. So. No, it's not that big of a deal. In terms of like updates, I think you mentioned. So that's what we're trying to work on with New Paltz right now is try to figure out like, is there a good schedule for doing like monthly updates or whatever? Right now, we've kind of just been pushing to the master branch as we have stable code. But yeah, I mean, that's something we'd like to figure out because I think like more mature products will do like a monthly update or whatever.
Would folks welcome pull requests?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So what? Yeah.
Go ahead. As I said, we built this in Laravel. So I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. The whole migration path and stuff for the database. So like, there's really we don't really do breaking updates. It's all go to the migration path and so forth. So
But in terms of pull requests, yeah. So like my happiest day was when we got our first like bug report and pull request from somebody at New Paltz. And it's like, yeah, I found a problem, and here's the solution, and like accept, and
someone's using it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, absolutely. If you guys wanna like contribute or whatever, that find our bugs. We've done a good job getting rid of stuff, but so like for example, single sign-on. Binghamton University uses CAS with SAML. New Paltz was using CAS without SAML, and we support both. But they were the first production deployment that had that in there, so they found a couple bugs in there, and so that's now been all addressed. Yeah, so we're happy to have people test things in ways that we haven't done. Other questions?
Extensibility, I guess, is what I was looking at. So you said LAMP is done in PHP then on the back end. What do you guys develop this in?
So this is, as Adam mentioned, this is the backend code is written in it's PHP, but it's specifically Laravel. I think we're running Laravel 5.7 right now. So we use a MySQL database, but New Paltz decided they were going to use MariaDB, so apparently that works. But then by and large, I mean, yes, the backend application is written in Laravel, but all of our developers who develop these micro applications in here are developing in pretty much straight JavaScript, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, whatever. So yes, you can develop in PHP, but if you submitted a pull request that said I want to develop a specific thing in PHP, that's like that might get rejected just because the expectation is that like compliance training, that's something that's like a Binghamton specific thing, so that's a micro application that's written in JavaScript with an API, whereas something like workflows, which is a base level engine thing, that's a Graphene thing that's written in more PHP.
And I'm just trying to understand because I'm looking at some things like course scheduler stuff to say, okay, our labs are utilizing, just throws it up to the calendar. I'm a Java guy, so Groovy to consume that and then stream that.
As far as the API backend, I mean that can obviously be written in anything, and that's why this is meant to be just the front layer that ties back into any data.
Exactly. And I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, there's really no limitation on what the backend
right.
can be. It can be Python, it can be Java. Yeah.
If you wanted to write a data layer in Groovy or whatever, that would absolutely make sense. So any massaging of the data that you would want to do, any handshaking with the database or whatever, as long as you're exposing that back as an API, then you can consume that on the other side.
Absolutely, which is cool. And that's kind of what I want to understand.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome.
Other questions about this? Nope. I guess we're done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.